They called the cops on me because I parked on the wrong side of the street. I wasn't even part of their HOA, but try telling that to a woman who believes she owns the entire neighborhood. The officers showed up, clipboard in hand, and that's when I decided not to argue. I just smiled, because what they didn't know yet was that the property they were defending so fiercely, it already belonged to me. Maple Glen wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a performance. Every blade of grass was trimmed to the exact same height, every mailbox stood at identical angles, and every porch light glowed with the same warm, controlled perfection. From the outside, it looked peaceful, like something out of a real estate brochure, but anyone who'd lived there long enough knew the truth. Peace wasn't free here. It was enforced. Linda Duval, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, made sure of that. She didn't run the neighborhood. She ruled it. Her pastel suits, her clipboard, her little smile that never reached her eyes. They were all part of the uniform. People didn't cross her, not because she had power, but because she had time. Endless time to make your life miserable if you dared to disobey one of her sacred bylaws. When the for sale sign went up at 112 Cedar Lane, everyone assumed another eager young family would move in, the kind who hosted block parties and overpaid for landscaping. But the buyer never showed their face. The house stayed empty for months, the grass growing just long enough to make Linda twitch. She left passive-aggressive notes on the door, threatened fines, even complained to the city once. She didn't realize she was actually complaining about me. I'd been watching Maple Glen for over a year, not because I wanted to live there. I wanted to own it. My company had quietly purchased several properties from longtime residents looking to downsize. A few rental conversions, a few HOA loopholes, and before long, I held a majority interest in the community's land rights. But I kept my name off the records. I wanted to see who would show their true colors first. So, when I parked my truck outside 112 Cedar Lane that morning, just to check the property line, I wasn't expecting a war. I was in jeans, a plain t-shirt, clipboard in hand, no suit, no name tag, just another stranger in their perfect little world. It didn't take long. Within 15 minutes, a woman in yoga pants stormed out of her driveway like she'd just been activated. "Excuse me," she shouted, phone already out. "You can't park there. This is private HOA property." I told her, calmly, that I wasn't part of the HOA, just handling some maintenance on one of the lots. She didn't like that answer. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, all pastel polos and judgmental stares. The air buzzed with entitlement. Then Linda appeared. She crossed the street like she was entering a courtroom she already owned. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. "Sir, I'm the HOA president," she said, voice sharp but rehearsed. "You'll need to move your vehicle immediately, or I'll have no choice but to contact law enforcement." I smiled politely and told her again. I wasn't part of her HOA. I didn't know her compliance. That's when she said it. The line that told me everything I needed to know. "If you live here, you're part of my HOA. That's how it works. Not the HOA, my HOA." That single word was the spark. Because she wasn't defending community standards. She was defending control. And I knew then. I wouldn't just move my truck. I'd move her out. So, when the police cruiser rolled up 20 minutes later, lights flashing, neighbors filming from behind their curtains, I didn't argue. I handed the officer my ID, answered their questions, and kept my smirk to myself. They didn't know it yet, but the woman who called them was about to find out what it feels like to live under someone else's. After that day, I became their favorite ghost story. The man who parked where he shouldn't have. The outsider. The one who didn't belong. Within a week, I was getting daily notes taped to my truck windshield, all typed in the same passive-aggressive font, all unsigned. Vehicles must not remain parked on the street. Overnight. This property is subject to HOA visual compliance rules. Failure to respond may result in escalation. They didn't realize I had cameras installed on every corner of the property, each one quietly recording every concerned neighbor who stopped by to peek through my fence or take pictures. At first, I let it play out, let them feel powerful. I wanted to see how far they'd go when they thought no one was watching. It didn't take long for Linda to escalate. She started showing up at the house when I wasn't home, slipping envelopes under the door, leaving voice messages on a number she must have gotten from county records. "You need to cooperate," she'd say. "This community has standards." But her tone shifted after the third week, when her own HOA board began asking questions she couldn't answer. I'd quietly requested copies of their bylaws through an attorney, citing potential land use conflicts. That word, land use, set off alarm bells she didn't even know she had. When I drove through Maple Glen after sunset, I could see it in the neighbors' eyes, unease. They'd built their peace on rules, and now those rules were starting to bend. Rumors spread fast. Some said I was suing the HOA. Others whispered that I was a developer trying to shut it down. Then came the letter that made everything official. Notice of non-compliance, Lot 112, Cedar Lane, a $500 fine for non-conforming exterior maintenance. The letter claimed my shutters were the wrong shade of blue. The house was vacant. I hadn't even moved in. That's when I stopped watching and started acting. I hired a property attorney and sent the HOA a certified request, demanding a full record of their fines, meeting minutes, and financial statements under state statute. They ignored it. So I sent a second, then a third. Finally, they responded, but not how I expected. A week later, 2 uniformed officers showed up at the property again. Same department, same tired look. "Mr. Carter," one said, "we got a call about a disturbance. The HOA president claims you're trespassing on private property." I could barely hold in a laugh. "This is my property," I said and handed him the paperwork. He flipped through the documents, brow furrowed. Deeds, lot rights, transfer records, and at the bottom, Maple Glen HOA, subsurface land lease agreement, terminated. That last line changed everything. The officer's tone softened. "Well, looks like you're good here, sir." He nodded toward Linda, who was standing across the street, arms folded, face pale. Maybe it's time everyone took a breath. I didn't smile this time. I just looked at her, and she looked right back, realization dawning like a slow storm. She'd been policing land that didn't belong to her anymore, but she still tried to fight. Over the next month, she called every agency she could think of. County zoning, environmental services, even the fire department. If she couldn't control me through the HOA, she'd bury me in red tape. What she didn't know was that my company had already bought the adjacent lots, the ones the HOA used for common spaces. The park, the sign at the entrance, even the lot where the HOA meeting room stood. All mine. So when I sent out a quiet notice to all residents and board members of the Maple Glen Homeowners Association, announcing a meeting to discuss updated lease terms, it caused chaos. People called, panicked, demanded answers. Linda tried to cancel it, but legally, she couldn't. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 6 p.m., inside the same community hall they'd used for years. Now technically my property. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was full. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering. Some glared. Some avoided eye contact. Linda sat at the front table, trembling hands clutching her clipboard like a shield. She started first, of course, rehearsed, confident, voice trembling just slightly. "We are here tonight to address recent confusion regarding property boundaries and ownership records," she said. "There are false rumors spreading, and I want to set the record straight." That was my cue. I stepped forward, holding a folder, the same one that had been sitting on my lawyer's desk for months. "If you'd like to set the record straight," I said, placing it on the table, "this might help." Inside were property deeds, stamped and verified. Every one of them showed the same name, Carter Holdings, LLC. Gasps rippled through the room. Linda's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but I kept going. "The HOA has been operating under expired land use agreements for nearly 6 years," I said calmly. "Every inch of common property you think you manage, from the park to the entry signs, belongs to me. And as of last month, so does this hall." Someone in the back actually laughed. A nervous, shocked sound. Another neighbor muttered, "Wait, so you're our landlord?" I looked right at Linda. "That's exactly right." Her jaw tightened. "You can't," she began, but I cut her off. "I can, and I did. You called the cops on me for parking on my own land. You fined me for maintenance on a house you don't control. Now you'll answer to me." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. That's when she snapped, slammed her clipboard on the table, voice cracking as she shouted, "You think you can come into my neighborhood and take everything?" And again, that word, my. I didn't respond. I just let her voice echo in the sterile room, watched the neighbors' faces twist from loyalty to disgust. They weren't defending her anymore. They were realizing what she really was, a woman who'd mistaken power for ownership. By the time the meeting ended, half the board had resigned. The others demanded an audit. Linda left first, shaking, humiliated. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Because exposing her wasn't enough. I wanted to make sure she could never abuse that power again. And the next move I made would make sure of it. By Monday morning, Maple Glen was split down the middle. Half the neighbors were whispering apologies when they passed my house. The other half doubled down, siding with Linda, clinging to the idea that order was slipping away. The community group chat was chaos. Someone even posted that I'd stolen the neighborhood. Linda, humiliated and cornered, wasn't the type to go quietly. She filed for an emergency injunction against me, claiming I'd obtained the land titles illegally, that my company's purchases were fraudulent. She even held a press conference in her driveway, reporters snapping photos as she stood beside her "No Trespassing" sign, declaring she would defend the integrity of the HOA. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. My attorney called me that afternoon, voice calm but tight. She's trying to make it public. Wants to drag this into the media. Let her, I said. Truth holds up better than spin. The next morning, I got my own call from the county courthouse. The hearing was set for Friday. 1 week, I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirk, heard the way she'd said my HOA like a crown she never earned. But now, she was about to find out what it feels like to lose everything you built on arrogance. Friday came gray and cold. The courthouse steps were lined with reporters and a few curious neighbors. I wore the same plain flannel and jeans she'd once mocked. She arrived in an immaculate white suit, hair pulled so tight it looked painful, smile rehearsed for the cameras. Inside the courtroom, she sat across from me, still playing president. The judge entered, shuffled papers, and started with her side. Her lawyer went first, pacing dramatically. Your Honor, this man has exploited loopholes to seize control of our client's community. The judge raised a hand. Your client's what? Our client's neighborhood, sir. A pause. The judge leaned back, unimpressed. Neighborhoods aren't owned. Land is. I didn't have to say a word. When it was our turn, my attorney opened a single folder. Inside were the signed deeds, public tax records, and, most importantly, emails between Linda and former homeowners that showed she'd knowingly ignored property transfer notices. Each one was a nail in her coffin. Linda tried to interrupt, voice trembling. That's taken out of context. But the judge cut her off. Mrs. Duval, it appears you've been enforcing HOA authority over land you do not legally control. That's not a matter of interpretation. That's fraud. The air went still. She slumped slightly, the color draining from her face. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. The judge continued. Effective immediately. The Maple Glen Homeowners Association is placed under injunction pending full audit. Mr. Carter, he looked up at me. As a verified property holder, you retain temporary administrative authority until this is resolved. A quiet murmur rippled through the courtroom. Journalists scribbling, neighbors whispering. Linda finally broke the silence. You can't do this, she said, voice cracking. You don't know what this neighborhood will become without order. I met her eyes. Order built on fear isn't order. It's control. The bailiff's voice echoed. Court is adjourned. Reporters swarmed as we left, flashing cameras bouncing off marble floors. Someone shouted, Mr. Carter, is it true you're evicting the HOA? I didn't answer. But as I stepped outside into the sunlight, I saw Linda standing alone at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Mascara streaked, her clipboard gone. For a moment, she looked small. The woman who once made people tremble over mailbox colors now stood surrounded by nothing but silence. Then her phone buzzed. I watched her read a message, shoulders tensing. She looked up, eyes full of disbelief, and stormed off toward her car. That message? It was from her own HOA board. They'd just voted to dissolve the association entirely. The moment she drove away, I finally exhaled. Months of tension unwound in that single breath. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was something heavier. Because when you dismantle power built on fear, you also inherit the ruins it leaves behind. The next day, I walked through Maple Glen. Lawns still gleamed. Mailboxes still matched. But people waved now. Not the stiff, performative wave of obligation, but the kind that means, maybe things will be different now. Linda's house sat quiet. Curtains drawn, driveway empty. By Monday, a moving truck arrived. She never said a word to me. Not that day, not ever again. But one neighbor, Mark, the retired teacher who used to nod politely from across the street, stopped me as I checked the mail. "You gave her what she deserved," he said. "But you also gave us a chance to breathe." For the first time in months, I smiled. That's all I wanted. Then I walked back up the path, the same one where this all began, where she once called the cops because she thought I didn't belong. Now, every inch of it was mine, and for the first time, Maple Glen actually felt free. Weeks passed before the dust truly settled. The Maple Glen entrance sign, the one with gold letters that once read, "An HOA community," now stood half empty, the final 2 words pried off by a maintenance crew. People stopped to take photos of it, like it was the end of an era. For some, it was. Without Linda, there was no one barking orders about hedge height or mailbox paint, no one writing anonymous notes about lawn ornaments or driveway oil stains. For the first time in years, the neighborhood exhaled. You could feel it. In the laughter of kids playing basketball in driveways that were once off limits, in the porch lights that stayed on later than the HOA's curfew once allowed. But freedom, I learned, comes with silence. And silence can be strange. I'd walk the streets some evenings and notice how quiet the nights were without her constant patrols. The neighborhood group chat had gone from chaos to stillness. No warnings. No screenshots, just photos of dogs, garage sales, and people helping each other fix sprinklers. For a while, I thought that was enough. Then came the letter. It was a simple envelope, no return address. Inside was a short handwritten note in a looping script I didn't recognize. "Be careful what you build on the ashes of control. Sometimes peace invites its own kind of decay." I stared at it for a long time. No signature, but I could almost hear her voice. I didn't show anyone. I just folded it neatly and tucked it into the same folder where I kept all the legal documents. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. The weeks that followed tested that piece. Some neighbors wanted to reinstate the HOA. Just in a limited form, they said, to protect property values. Others argued fiercely against it. I stayed neutral, hosting meetings at my place, watching them debate in the same room where Linda once handed out fines. The difference was, now everyone had a voice. No gavels. No threats. Just conversations. Messy, human, sometimes loud, but honest. That's when I realized. It was never about lawns or mailboxes or bylaws. It was about people trying to control the only thing they thought they could. Each other. One night I sat on my porch sipping coffee as the sun dropped behind the identical rooftops she once ruled over. The air smelled like jasmine and grill smoke. Across the street, Mark was helping his grandson fix a bike. 2 doors down, the family that Linda once fined for unauthorized Christmas decorations was hanging lights again. In October. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A few weeks later, I got a call from the county clerk's office. "Mr. Carter, just confirming, you're still listed as Maple Glen's primary property trustee. Do you wish to renew that status?" I hesitated. For the first time, I didn't know the answer. The control that once felt like justice now felt unnecessary. I didn't want to be another version of what I'd fought against, so I said no. I signed the papers, handed over partial management rights to a collective board of residents, real neighbors elected by the community, people who actually lived here, not a woman trying to turn it into her personal kingdom. When the official seal stamped the page, something inside me unknotted. It was over. Not the fight. That ended long ago, but the need to keep fighting. I drove through the front gate one last time before replacing the sign altogether. Where Maple Glen, an HOA community once stood, I installed a new one made from reclaimed wood. The letters carved by hand. It simply read, "Welcome home." No rules underneath. No fine print. That weekend, the whole neighborhood showed up to celebrate. Kids ran through sprinklers, grills smoked, music played from open garage doors. I saw people who hadn't spoken in years laughing over burgers, sharing old stories. Someone even joked, "Who would have thought the guy they called the cops on threw us the best block party we've ever had?" I laughed too, but deep down I knew it wasn't the party that mattered. It was the peace that came after. Later that night, when the music faded and the last of the neighbors went home, I walked the street alone. The same pavement where officers once parked, where Linda once barked orders through a clipboard, where fear once dictated every motion. Now it was just quiet. I stopped in front of her old house. The windows were dark, the curtains gone. For a brief moment I could almost see her there, standing proud, ruling her kingdom of asphalt and asphalt-colored souls. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just pity, because maybe she wasn't the villain she seemed. Maybe she was just someone who needed control to feel safe. And when I took that away, she had nothing left to hold. We all crave control, I realized. Some of us just learn to let go before it destroys us. I turned back toward home, the warm light spilling through my own windows. I'd rebuilt this place, not just the house, but the spirit of what community was supposed to mean. And that's when the final thought hit me, the one that stuck long after the cameras stopped rolling and the story faded online. You can own the land. You can own the title. You can even own the gate that keeps everyone out. But none of it means anything if you lose the neighbors inside it.